No, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so welcome again. My name is Lauren Wilkie. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the VP of Strategic Partnerships at Point Source Youth. We are a national organization working in the movement to prevent and end youth homelessness, and really honored to facilitate MPLC and work with folks that you're going to get a chance to hear from about their flexible cash assistance models that they're implementing nationally. I'm going to pass it over to Casey Trupin to give us a little welcome.
Great. Thanks so much, Lauren. It's uh, it's really exciting to see so many people on this webinar, especially given the amazing lineup of speakers from Point Source Youth, Valley Youth House, Sasha Bruce Youth Work, and Covenant House Alaska. I should give a little bit more of an intro. My name is Casey Trupin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm with the Rakes Foundation, and we support efforts around the country on youth homelessness and certainly around prevention of youth homelessness. It's probably an understatement to say that we're experiencing a shifting political landscape, and I think it's particularly important that we're all here focused on prevention and what it takes to prevent a young person in a housing crisis from actually entering the homelessness system in the first place. And flexible cash assistance is clearly creating an evidence base that demonstrates that it's cost effective, that it saves money and resources, that it reduces trauma or prevents trauma for young people, and most importantly, that it leads to really positive outcomes for young people and their families. The Rakes Foundation is firmly committed to prevention. We've heard from young people for a long time that prevention is possible, that it's critical, that it's the way to ensure that young people experience the right outcomes. Some of our federal partners are not able to attend this webinar, and we will, notwithstanding that, we are all continuing the work and continue to work with each of you at the national and federal and state level. So, with that said, I want to get to the meat of this, but first I want to turn it over to Larry.
Well, thank you so much, Casey. And yeah, so amazing to see so many of you here today. And I want to especially thank Casey and everyone here for your commitment and support and leadership around innovations for prevention and around flexible cash assistance in particular. Point Source Youth is really focused, laser focused on prevention, on flexible cash assistance, also known in some terms as direct cash transfers as prevention. And I just want to highlight that during these shifting political times, as Casey mentioned, it's even more important and critical to look at the evidence of what is working, which is the kind of heart and soul of NPLC, what saves money and what's shifting young people away from homelessness and into stable housing and work and lives that flourish. So Point Source is also doubling down on this work. Couldn't be more excited to be here today. And with that, and speaking of the incredible work Point Source is doing, I'd love to turn it over to Lauren, who's going to lead the webinar.
Beautiful. Thanks, Larry. Um, so I just wanted, since many of you may be hearing about the National Prevention Learning Collaborative for the first time through this webinar, just wanted to give an opportunity before we really get into the meat and potatoes of the webinar to raise up what NPLC is. So this is a learning space that's been established to champion and share things that are happening in our field that are today preventing youth homelessness. So all of the folks you're going to hear from today are actively implementing projects, preventing youth homelessness in their communities, using this particular strategy. And so NPLC is a learning space for folks to come together to hear what others are doing to prevent youth homelessness. So this is the first of many learning spaces that we'll be having over the course of this year. We'll be doing it in a variety of ways through webinars. We'll have some written products. There will be a landing page on the Point Source Youth website with all of these documents and webinars and recordings. We will have some sessions at our national conference in Baltimore in October. And so I think we hope that this is not the last time that all of you join an NPLC learning space. And my email will be at the end of this webinar, so you can get in touch if you want to get more involved with folks in NPLC. But yeah, we hope to see you again in a future NPLC learning space. So I'm going to pass it off to Rocio.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm going to talk about direct cash transfers as prevention. Our first cohort just ended in December, so I'll be talking a little bit about the data that we have found in some of the communities we're working with. But first off, my name is Rocio Evelyn Carranza Jacinto. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Associate Director for direct cash transfers as prevention at Point Source Youth. I am based in Duwamish Land, so also known as Seattle. And I'll get started. So what is direct cash transfers as prevention? So it's a one-time variable, non-restrictive cash payment for a young person when they're experiencing a housing crisis. So it's really about preventing the young person from ever entering a homelessness system. It's really centered on young people. We have youth consultants who would provide, who we contract from the area to implement this. So they get to do it from the bare bones all the way to implementing the cash. They get a say in it. We also do focus groups with communities. So we have young people say about, how is this going to be implemented in specifically my area? It's really focused on equity and trust. It's really about finding new ways and creative ways to support vulnerable young people. It's about building generational wealth in communities that may have been disfranchised in the past. And it's really an investment in communities and also an effective housing intervention. And so, besides the payment that the young person is going to receive, they have the option of supportive services, 3 to 6 months from the provider. And I'll talk a little bit more later about that. For eligibility, in order for a young person to be eligible for DCDP, in this last cohort, we had the age range was 16 to 24-year-olds, but it really depends on communities. Some communities decided to just serve 18 to 24. And now we're starting a new pilot program in LA County where they're deciding to push the age to 30-year-old folks. So it really depends on the community. So it's the amount is immediate and it's equitable and it's distributed to the young person's needs. So it's tailored to whatever situation they're in. They also have to be experiencing a housing crisis, but not be literally homeless. So young folks who not be eligible for DCDP would be in any housing program such as rapid rehousing, transitional housing, shelters, in an inhabitable place or a car. We in this last cohort did serve young people who were couch surfing or had to leave an unstable situation. And so we supported them in stabling that with DCDPs. But like I said, this eligibility is really flexible. It depends on the community, what they want and what their needs are. So we really follow the community. So there's 3 components to the breakdown of DCDP. The first component is the young person comes to the provider and creates a housing action plan and a budget. So DCDP is really, and we've seen it also, right, that most of the budget goes to necessities, which is like housing, utilities, that kind of stuff, and basic needs. So their housing action plan has to be really focused on stably housing them. And so that is the end goal. But in the items, there's also the opportunity to budget in things like pet care, things like furniture, if they do need that. We have had young people who are parenting who need a crib or need items for their young child. And also joy, right? I really love DCDP because it goes beyond the necessities. It really supports the young person in their growth and development. So those 2 things are created with the provider at the CBO, and once that is created, the young person, even with this last cohort, they used a third payment system, and we'll talk about it in a bit. but they received through that card a one-time variable and unconditional payment according to the budget they made. And then the third component, like I said, the CBO does not have the option to not provide these services, but the young person has the option to opt out of these supportive services. So the CBO had to provide housing navigation, financial literacy, relationship mediation, and case management. And a lot that I heard from providers nationally is that maybe the young person at first just really needed the payment to stabilize their situation, and then they would go back at 1 month or 3 months and be like, okay, like now I can really like focus on these other things in my life, such as like, I need to find a job, I want to enroll to get my GED. And so they were able to have the space to do that after they stabilized their housing situation. The framework of DCT is very unique in the fact that rather than just being a program in the community, it's a community program. So it's a fund within the community. And the point of this is that DCTP is supposed to be able to reach as far and as many young people as possible in that community. So the main CBO is the one who holds the funds, the prevention specialist within the CBO. And so they have to build relationships and constant communication with other CBOs in the community who engage youth on a daily. So, like folks who go to community colleges, right? McKinney-Vento liaisons in school, other shelter providers, maybe other BIPOC youth orgs that serve young people, maybe a counselor. So it's really the CBO has to have relationships with these other providers because these providers are an avenue to accessing other young people to be able to access DCTP. So the prevention specialist meets with those trained providers who will be trained in DCTP, and they're able to access DCTP funds for their young people who they come across. So this is just a chart explaining how it works. So let's say like one young person, you work with young people and they come to you and they have a crisis that's threatening their housing. And so that provider or trained provider would really start having a housing conversation with them and start building that housing action plan I was discussing in budget. So it'd be like, okay, let's lay out all the options. What are option A? What are option B? What are option C? And not really focusing on one option, but letting them know these are the options I have for housing, which one's the best, and really having the young person lead that, then budgeting that. Because the budgeting part is really important, right? Let's say that young person wants to relocate, like they don't have anywhere in California, but maybe grandma's in Arizona, but they just need to get to Arizona. So really looking with the provider, like, hey, like let's look at ticket flights from California to Arizona because we budgeted 500, but in reality, when we start looking at tickets, maybe it's 900. So let's really but look and do that research so that budget is as accurate and close to possible of the money you may need to fund this housing action plan. And so after the housing plan is created and the budget is all created, the young person receives immediately the one-time variable amount that they came up with. And then they have like the option to access any of these supportive services. So it is a one-time payment. So the good thing about one-time payment is that if it's considered a gift under 17,000, and so they don't need to add it into their taxes. So far, the largest amount we've seen to a young person was in New York, and it was 9,900. And that was just because they were moving a whole family to another unit. So it was like a family, I want to say 7 or 8 folks. And so that's why it took a lot. But some folks just need like 600 or 1,000 to really stabilize their situation. And I'm going to show a little examples of communities, the difference. Also, with this last cohort, the provider had to work with the young person. If they were accessing government benefits, they needed to call in and ask, like, I'm receiving this one-time payment. Will this affect This month's benefits, so the provider, the prevention specialist would have to call with the young person about food stamps, welfare, TANF, Medicaid. So they had to do support in that part. And then for this last cohort, folks have been using prepaid cards. So the most famous platforms was Usio, and then I had other folks use Rapid Repay, Tremendous. For Usio, the money appears into that card 24 to 48 hours. So it has to be immediate right away. The young person leaves with the card and the money. They're able to go to ATMs and withdraw those funds and put into their bank if they want. One thing that we ran into is that some ATMs charge for fees, and so the provider really had to work with that young person to figure out, okay, these banks like have these fees, these banks don't put any fees, so the prevention specialist can support the young person in figuring that out once they receive their payment. So what can DCTP pay for? So DCTP can only pay up to 3 months rent. Really, we were really trying to see that the fourth month, we really want that young person to be stably housed. So we're looking at a sustainable housing plan, right? Like, let's say a young person's like, I lost my job, but I'm trying to look for a job. I just need help with these 3 months rent. So we're hoping by the fourth month, when they don't have DCTP, that plan will still be sustainable for them because we want to we want them to be successful. So working with them, if that is the fourth month, if it's something that's going to be hard for them to do, like looking at other options and other plans. Um, and then also it can be used for deposits if they're looking for a new place, like stabilizing a current situation. A lot of the folks that we're working with couch surfing, they actually like we had folks that are like, hey, like I'm couch surfing at a garage. They say I'm fine to stay here, but I want to make it more living. Maybe you want to put plumbing in it, so DCTP can help with maybe getting a sink, maybe putting in a bathroom, and how long that would cost. So, and then other situations we do relationship mediation. So maybe there was a conflict between roommate, so the provider really can support in that and trying to mediate that conflict. DCTP can be used to reduce debt, elimination, other basic necessities, moving costs, relocation expenses, and purchasing furniture. So these are also the main items that young people budget for. And then I touched a little bit about the supportive services this last cohort we provided. So housing navigation really is the main one in the beginning because we're trying to stabilize that young person's situation. So talking to landlord, property managers, assisting with apartment application, lease review, all those things. And then financial coaching really came in a little bit once they got their payment. I know a lot of providers had to financially help the young person financially manage their funds. And so coming up, why we come up with a budget is also we have another step after they receive their payment is like, okay, in the long term, what does your income look like? Like, how can, we increase your income? Do you want support in going back to school, finding a job training, that kind of stuff? Relationship mediation. This was really to support a young person who maybe was stabilized, but then some conflict happened. And so supporting the young person in that situation. And then case management. Anything else, like I said, job readiness, job training, help with medical, dental, counseling, those kind of stuff go under case management. And so young people really, most of them, all of them, access the housing navigation portion in the beginning, and then the other three, after they receive their payment, access the other three supportive services. So here is a snapshot of the data from this last cohort that finished in December. We had 8 communities in 7 states. As you can see, the average per cost served is 3,700. We served 348 young people. but those young people might have had dependents, was living with aunt or grandma. And so besides those young people who were stably housed, 626 other people situation was also stably housed because were impacted by the payment the young person received. 89% remained housed after 1 month. 95% stabilized their current housing situation or created a new opportunity. 52% of those funds went to housing, relocation, and utilities. The folks who accessed this fund, 83% were Black, Indigenous, or people of color. 40% were part of the LGBTQIA2S plus community. Um, 33% were involved prior with a system, whether that's foster care, youth, incarceration, that kind of stuff. Mental, and then 31% reported they had a mental or physical disability. 27% were parents or had pregnant or had dependents, and then 88% were 18 to 24-year-olds. The other were 16, the other percentage 16 to 18. Just one last thing I want to point out here. If we really are looking at radical reimagining what it looks like to end youth homelessness, DCTP provides that framework. Currently, we are spending $27,589 for the average cost of emergency shelter beds or transitional housing. But it really costs not just the young person, but a whole household to stabilize less than $4,000. So we'd be saving 24,000 dollars in taxpayer money. And then lastly, I just want to talk through some communities. So like I mentioned, there were 8 communities in DCTP our first cohort. And you can see them there on a chart. We had Lane County, Oregon, Contra Costa County in California, Tucson, Arizona, Austin, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia. We had 2 CBOs in New York, and we had Grand Rapids, Michigan. So in Atlanta, they served 50 young people. 7 of those young people had dependents, and besides those 50 young people, 22 other people will be housed due to DCTP. The largest payment given out in Atlanta was $4,500. The smallest to stabilize a young person was $650, but the average came out to be $2,725. So it's lower than the national average. For New York, Henry Street Settlement, they served 52 young people. 11 of those young people had dependents. Besides those 52 young people, 36 other people will be housed due to DCTP. The largest amount, which was our biggest one across nationally, was 9,900. Our smallest one was 645, and then the average was a little bit higher, $4,042.10, which makes sense. New York has a higher cost of living. Okay, well, thank you all. I know this was quick, fast. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, my email's there. I'll pass it now to Lauren.
Thanks, Rocio. Okay, so I'm going in alphabetical order. So I'm going to pass it over to Sean at Covenant House, Alaska.
All right. Cool. And it shows that you can see my slides. Perfect. Man, technology is so cool when it works. Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Gaither. I work at Covenant House, Alaska. I use he, him pronouns. I am living on the land of the Dena'ina people. Yeah, and I'm going to tell you about our amazing program that we're working. So about Covenant House, our vision is for youth to experience homelessness, for it to be rare, brief, and non-recurring. We have our new approach, which is our PDP program, which is what I'm currently managing, is to impact and end homelessness. All of our youth, no matter what program they're in, including mine, have access to a load of services. Some that are unique to our Covenant House site are education and employment. We actually have an academy. We have our housing continuum, which all of us have. We've got our main youth engagement shelter and our permanency navigators. All fantastic. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, cool. It's working. So our PDP grant, it's funds for 3 years. It started in 2024. It ends in 2026. We were the only West Coast site with Covenant House Alaska out of the 11 chosen in the US. All of us are participating in the National Learning Collaborative, which I highly recommend everybody continue in if this is your first meeting. It's been beneficial to me. It's been actually really nice to connect with people across the US and like have the same problems and learn very quickly on how to fix things. And as new people come in, it's been really nice as well. We're currently partnering for our site for this program with OCS, which is our Office of Children Services, our Independent Living Specialists, our UAA Child Welfare Academy, and then Facing Foster Care in Alaska is a nonprofit board that I'm actually a member of. And then our Youth Alaska Action Board on Housing and Homelessness, our HIAB. Our target population for our cohort is different than everybody else that's in this program with us. And I'm going to go into who we targeted and why. 60% of our youth have a history of child welfare or juvenile justice involvement. Our minors that were sheltered last year, 67% were actively in custody with Office of Children's Services. And in Alaska, 44% of foster care youth will experience homelessness by the age of 21. Alaska is one of the states that has actually extended foster care to extend out to the age of 21. That was voted into law, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. It used to be 18, and now it's 21, which is great. So our vision was to support young people who are aging out of the foster care to achieve independent living. Our goal was to provide navigation and flexible cash assistance to prevent them from becoming homeless. Our target population was youth exiting foster care, so 17 to 21. Our cohort is 30 youth at one time that's going to be enrolled in the project. I have one prevention navigator that's working directly with their independent living specialist to support the youth in their transition plans. We have flexible cash assistance, aka direct cash transfers. It's been phenomenal. It's really, really kind of cool. Each youth is going to receive $3,300 per year. So if they're in all 3 years, that's $9,900. It's flexible cash that's client driven in the frequency and in the amounts. I have 3 clients right now that have been in, I think, since November and haven't touched a dime. They haven't needed it. They've just been utilizing the navigator. They're like really planning out their money. We're utilizing Usio as well for digital cash transfers. We decided that other platforms weren't as anonymous as we wanted them to be, and it had we were scared that maybe if using Venmo or some of the other things, we know that there's a setting that you can turn off, but showing that payments were coming from Covenant House, we didn't want somebody to accidentally see that. So we chose Usio because it is more private. And then we're leveraging everyone else's resources. Anyone who's worked with me has heard me say spend everyone else's money first and then use ours. We kind of share that with our youth and we let them know like, hey, you're a former foster youth. You have access to an FYI voucher. You have access to $5,000 for education and training. You have access to $3,000 from your IL. I will spend the money that you have with us on anything you need, but let's use the money that everybody else has accordingly. Eligibility for us is 17 to 21 in OCS custody and working a transition plan, just basically still working with an IL worker, interested in living independently, not experiencing homelessness or accessing homeless services. There's not an asterisk right there. Really, the only thing that we are trying to prove in our demonstration project is that this amount of money will help them not hit the shelter. So we're currently, because of OCS has a backlog and is kind of full in the state of Alaska, we have 355 youth in Anchorage alone that are eligible for this program that are in foster care or exiting foster care system. We're allowing them, because there's not that many placements in town, to refer people that are in other programs that are independent living or like a rites of passage program or similar. We're just not allowing or accepting applicants from the shelter directly or who is currently homeless. they get to work with our prevention navigator, ACE. The process is really easy. We tried to make this as simple as possible. It's literally an IL referring them with a release of information and then their plan. And then they get in contact with the prevention navigator. We usually have like a nice sit down. We talk about the program, explain what we do, and then help them navigate from there. I went way too fast because I'm nervous. So sorry. And I've drank all my coffee, but I know I have time. I'm going to share a quick story. We've had one youth that came into the program. She was already on her FYI voucher. She was housed. She just got a new job at Verizon. She went to our housing authority and said, hey, this is my job. This is how much I'm going to make. They're like, awesome. You're going to make X amount of dollars per year. Your monthly rent on the voucher will be $800 a month. It's set up. That was Tuesday. She was let go Friday. She didn't tell anybody because she was scared that she was going to lose her voucher. She went until basically the week before. She was then brought into our program, pulled us aside after we had our meeting with OCS and said, I can't pay rent this month. I didn't want to tell OCS. She thought she would get kicked out. We explained that she wouldn't be kicked out of the program. And then we paid her rent. We immediately got on the phone with Alaska Housing and was able to change her rent. It's now down to, I think, $230 a month based on her income levels now. But to me, I know that seems so simple and it's just like, well, duh. But in every other program I've worked for Covenant House Alaska, I would have never been able to touch money until they went to the shelter or became homeless, which is just crazy to me because it was so simple. It's literally like we went in, we paid her rent, she's good. So it's really neat that we have this flexible cash, and it is truly something that you can do before they become homeless or have to experience homelessness. And it's been great. Yeah, I'm going to hand it back to you, Lauren. Thank you.
Amazing, Sean. And I've been seeing some folks start to ask questions in the Q&A, so feel free to keep those coming. We'll answer them as they come in, and we'll also have a moment for folks to raise their hand and use their voice as well. Okay, thanks, Sean. Okay, let's move over to Sasha Bruce and Jane. I'll pass it to you. You're muted, Jane.
All right, now.
There you go.
Are you able to see?
You're not in slideshow yet.
Okay.
There you
Okay,
go.
is that
Awesome.
working now? All right, wonderful. Okay. Thanks, Lauren. So my name is Jane McGee, and I'm Deputy Chief of Programs at Sasha Bruce Youth Work. My pronouns are she, her. For those of you who aren't familiar, Sasha Bruce Youth Work was founded way back in 1974, and we provide housing, shelter, drop-in programming, street outreach, and other supportive services for young people and their families across the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan area and in Prince George's County, Maryland. So our Resilience Project is what our prevention demonstration project is called. It is housed within our Bruce Empowerment Zone, which is a drop-in center for young people that's located in Prince George's County, Maryland. And that's what you're seeing a picture of on this slide. Prince George's County happens to be the largest county in Maryland, and it was the first county to establish a youth action board focusing on homelessness in Maryland. So kind of a neat little fact. So in Prince George's County, 87% of residents are people of color, with Black and Latino young people disproportionately impacted by poverty and also with housing instability. So another interesting fact about Prince George's County that we found is that it has the highest number of unaccompanied migrant children in Maryland. So these are some things that we took into consideration when we began to form our program. So for our PDP, Sasha Bruce partnered with Prince George's County Department of Social Services, Prince George's County Continuum of Care, the Latin American Youth Center, and Smile, which is an agency that serves LGBTQ youth. Youth Voice was integrated in each step of the project planning and design process with us. We really had a lot of input from our Youth Advisory Board within Sasha Bruce, which is called our CURB, and also Prince George's County Youth Advisory Board. Some of the key innovations that we put into the Resilience Project are the use of screening and assessment to prioritize youth that are at the greatest risk instead of just accepting applicants on a first come, first served basis. So this was something that we thought was really important to do with a limited amount of funds. We also are using a cohort model to build a sense of community and peer support within the youth. So we wanted to create community for young people who might not have that. So another thing that we did was have a tiered system so youth could select their own payment amount and have some choice in what denomination of money they get for what duration. And then finally, we have an evaluation measure that will measure our impact and hopefully inform improvements as we move forward. So our application period opened in July 2024, and the selection process was done in 2 stages. So we had screening first and then prioritization. So both of those were based on Chapin Hall's research. We sent links to the screener in English and Spanish to our continuum of care, our community partners, and then we publicized it on social media and our agency's website to really try to reach young people from all across Prince George's County. So we had our application period for screeners open for just over 3 weeks, and we received about 117 screener applications during the window. So the screener's purpose was to determine eligibility. So as you can see on this slide, the basic eligibility criteria that we were screening for was, are they a Prince George's County resident? Do they have a high risk of homelessness? Are they between ages of 16 to 24? And are they not receiving any other housing supports like vouchers or FYIs? So once the screener determined eligibility, those that were eligible moved on to the prioritization assessment. And then that I'll talk about more in the next slide. So for the prioritization assessment, a resilience coach met with each applicant that had passed the screening portion, either over the phone or in person. And at this stage, the youth was also able to select what tier of cash they were interested in. So basically, we wanted to find out if they were involved in other systems, right? So this would give them priority points, which would inform their ranking, which I'll talk about more. We wanted to know if the youth were experiencing any discrimination or problems obtaining or maintaining housing or employment, if they're disconnected from support systems, family, networks, and resources, or if they're fleeing violence or any unsafe situations at home or in the community. So this prioritization assessment generated a risk score for everyone who applied. And this allowed the applicants to be numerically ranked from highest risk down to lowest risk. Then we had a committee meet, which included members from the Prince George's County Youth Advisory Board, the Sasha Bruce Youth Advisory Board, and representatives from partner organizations. They all met to confirm the priorities on the list and then basically create the group of people who would be in that first cohort. So the demographics of our first cohort were pretty interesting. We found some pretty interesting things. At the time of application, 60% of the youth reported that someone in their home made them feel unsafe. 51% shared that they were a survivor of family or domestic violence. 58% were primarily Spanish speaking. 27% were under 18. 20% already had a job, 18% identified as LGBTQIA+, and 41% were having trouble with educational goals. So once they were done with prioritization and our cohort was selected, they were able to select their tier of support. So we started our cash distribution in August of 2024, and there were 3 options that the young people could choose from. So our tier 1 was $400 a month for 2 years. Tier 2, and that adds up to $9,600. Tier 2 was $600 a month for 1 year, plus $1,000 that they could utilize at any time for any type of housing emergency or really for any reason. So that equaled $8,200. And then tier 3, which was $5,000 one-time cash assistance. We, like others, chose to utilize UZO cards because of the availability to give them their money when they first come in that first day, and then also the ability to serve people who were under 18 and those who might not have documentation. One other really unique thing that happened with our cohort was that Prince George's County officials were able to have this money exempted from counting towards Maryland state benefits. So the young people were not penalized with their food stamps or medical or anything for having this cash. And then so far in the first 5 months, we've distributed $175,000 and $300. So instead of case managers, we have bilingual resilience coaches. Our YAB and CURB made the point that youth are not cases that they need to be managed, but they're people that need to be coached. So we developed the term resilience coaching to respect and affirm the needs of the youth. Our resilient coaches provide coaching and referrals to help the youth be ready for self-sufficiency before their time in the Resilience Project ends. So basically, all the services you would expect: financial coaching, employment, housing, linkage to basic needs, family reunification assistance, and then they are eligible for aftercare services for 12 months past their last payment. Groups have been a place for youth to learn, practice new skills, and we've noticed a sense of community that's beginning to form among the youth in the cohort. So I believe this group was a financial literacy group that was happening at our Bruce Empowerment Zone with the cohort. So some early successes that we've seen as far as how the $1,000 emergency payments from tier 2 have been used. 12 youth received their $1,000 and used it for rent to prevent eviction, and 1 young person paid a utility bill that had been disconnected. So it was able to be restored, and they were able to stay in their residence for that. So basically, these emergency payments have prevented 12 at-risk households from ending up in crisis. One of the stories from the beginning of our program, a Latina LGBTQIA+ client whose family was at the verge of homelessness when she applied, shared with us that since she's been participating, she's been able to give her family the $600 a month that she receives, and her family relationships have improved. So it's not really just about the money, but the whole family is really feeling a lot less stress due to that infused cash into the family. So we're going through a process of evaluation during the program, and the measures we're going to be looking at are the number of youth that remain stably housed at 12 and 24 months post-enrollment, and the number of youth that have increased resiliency and protective factors, and then the number of youth with a reduced risk of homelessness, and then finally participant satisfaction within the program. So we're going to be evaluating this to determine which dose of coaching services and financial support is proven to be most effective. And then finally, I need to mention that partnerships have really been beneficial for us in expanding the reach of this program. Through partnerships with Prince George's County and TD Bank, we were able to extend the age of the program up to 24 and add extra spots in the program. So there were about 30 extra spots able to be put in the program just based on the additional funding through partnerships. So this is really important in Prince George's County because there are only 20 youth emergency shelter beds in our county. So we really have to focus on stabilizing people before they end up at that point of needing one of those 20 beds, or even worse, end up on the street. So I'm going to kick it back to Lauren. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jane. Those stories were really impactful. Okay, Cordelia, are you Valley Youth House team ready?
Yes, we are ready.
Perfect.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, everybody. So we are the Synergy in Schools team at Valley Youth House. Hi, everybody. My name is Aquila. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the youth advisor for Synergies in Schools. And I'm also a youth advocate and organizer.
Hello, I'm Alexandra Rivera. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a youth advisory Synergy in Schools. I'm also a youth advocate fellow with Juvenile Law Center.
And my name is Quadira, pronoun she, her. I'm the Synergy in Schools supervisor at Valley Youth House. So I oversee the Synergy in Schools team. I really feel proud of the program because I helped build it from the backbones that my wonderful supervisor introduced to me when I started my time at Valley Youth House. So just to give a little brief background about Valley Youth House. So we are based in Pennsylvania, and our catalyst is just to make sure young people achieve their desired goals. It is very collaboratory, and we envision a world where every young person belongs to a nurturing community. So we started as a shelter in Lehigh Valley in 1973, and then we expanded to over 20 different counties across Pennsylvania. And specifically, the Synergy in Schools team is based in Philadelphia. So just to give a overview of what student and youth homelessness looks like in Philadelphia. So in school year 21-22, over 8,000 students were identified as homeless, and that is including ages birth to 21. And then as you see, there was an increase from the school year 22-23 to over 10,000 students. So these students, 80% of them were doubled up in couch surfing, which we know that does not meet the criteria or eligibility for HUD's definition. And so these young people, based off of their housing status and also their age, they were left into this gray area. So at Synergy in Schools, Valley Youth House, we saw an opportunity to expand the work that we're doing in Synergy in Schools, what we call it 1.0, which we'll touch more on later, to expand into more prevention work, which we are all here for, rooting for more funding, leaning into the more prevention side. Because of the 80% identified as doubled up or couch surfing, and they fall under what is considered McKinney-Vento definition. So that is how Synergy in Schools 2.0 grew, which is how we became a prevention demonstration project recipient. And so just some statistics about youth that fall into this gray area of homelessness, McKinney-Vento Act. We know that they have higher truancy rates in schools, lower test scores, higher higher suspension rates, and lower graduation rates. And so, just according to statistics, Schoolhouse Connection, young people without a high school diploma or GED are 4.5 times more likely to experience homelessness in the future.
And so over the 6-month planning period, we did a few things. We defined prevention in our own terms, and we created the eligibility criteria. We created our community needs assessment, specifically to target different supports and services. And 3, we built our program design based off of the 1.0 services and like strategic thinking. And 4, we have our evaluation and outcomes where we track progress and discover more improvements.
Prevention demonstration project. So defining prevention. Prevention refers to identifying and supporting unaccompanied youth who are at risk of becoming street homeless or entering a shelter. This includes youth who are couch surfing or double dub, so staying temporarily with others due to lack of housing, have moved or stayed away from stayed away from home more than twice within the 60 days, or at imminent, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, risk of having to leave their current living situation in the next 30 days.
So as Quilla and Lexi mentioned, this definition was developed during our 6-month planning period when we were expanding into 2.0 services. As Sean and Sasha Bruce and Rocio mentioned, in the 6-month planning process, it was a collaboratory process from different community providers and our young leaders in the community who have that firsthand experience of housing insecurity. So this is how we set the scene for our 2.0 services and how we defined it. So just to go into 1.0 services so you guys can have a deeper understanding of why we created the definition for prevention as such, we are operating under the McKinney-Vento Act. So that is young people from ages birth to 21 that have not graduated or received their GED that lack a fixed, stable, and adequate nighttime residence. So that tagline right there is what McKinney-Vento is. So in our program, we see at Synergy in Schools, Valley Youth House, we see a lot of unaccompanied youth that are couch surfing. So they don't fall into HUD's definition, so they're not eligible for a housing assessment. So, yep, that is our umbrella of McKinney-Vento. And from there, we started offering case management through our partnership with the School District of Philadelphia, which was a first in Philadelphia to see that type of immersion of homeless services and school academics, academic support like merged together. So building that partnership with our direct schools was a feat, but I've seen so much benefit from working so closely together with counselors, STEM teams, other school supports, being able to provide that wraparound services. Like we are a village, we're working together to see how we can support each young person in extension to what the school team is already doing. So then expanding into Synergy in Schools 2.0, we are still operating from under the definition of McKinney-Vento Act, but that's where we get into the prevention side. So whereas 1.0, we're working with young people that are couch surfing, doubled up. We're also working with young people that are living in a shelter or experiencing street homelessness. In 2.0, we are cut off for eligibility. First is that they cannot be living in a shelter or experiencing street homelessness. So whereas, they can still receive services from 1.0, they will not be eligible for services, which expands into our intervention tools, such as like our direct cash transfers. And based off of our mental health therapists, which was added onto 2.0 services, they may not be eligible to that if her caseload is at its max. So, and also for 2.0 services, we're focusing on unaccompanied youth because there aren't many services in Philadelphia that focus exactly on unaccompanied youth. We zero in on ages 14 to 21. I'm sorry for that typo. I will correct it. But so for 2.0 services, we are doing 14 to 21 years of age. But to be able to receive our flexible cash assistance, it is 16 to 21, just because of the legality, the red tape on that end for delivering payments. And again, like I said, it is before entering shelter or experiencing street homelessness. And our 30/60 rule, which is something that Lexi mentioned, which helped us define our prevention. So again, I'll just reiterate it. So in the next 30 days, if a young person has to leave where they're staying, they will be eligible as long as they meet the other criteria. Or in the last 60 days, they've had to move or they left where they were staying 2 or more times. So we do wiggle in between that 30/60. It's not like a hard cutoff because we're humans and real life situations happen, but that's the general framework that we operate from for eligibility for 2.0 services. So really just to give a snapshot, it's like 1.0 services is more open, and then for 2.0, we like zeroed in. But there's a lot of fluidity between both because we know these young people's situations are so transient. So getting into our program design, as Aquila mentioned, it was honestly a win that we are already doing this type of work for our 1.0 services. And 1.0 was developed out of funding from ARPA. And so we developed that partnership through the support of the ECHIA office at the School District of Philadelphia. And we are assigned specific schools to work with. And from there, we had like different tiered engagement models. So some schools we are, because we're still currently doing this, we are in there bi-weekly, some schools monthly, some schools as needed. And it's very fluid and able to be changed based off of the requests from our school partners, very collaboratory. We also built relationships with other local organizations such as NOMO, IDAY, just to name a few like major players in Philadelphia that offer different types of programming, professional development, positive youth development, positive social, emotional programs for young people in Philadelphia. Also in our program design, even from the start of 1.0, we had our peer-to-peer services. So we developed our youth ambassadors group. And so with our youth ambassadors group, it is like training it's a peer education model. So they're training their peers on understanding what youth and student homelessness looks like, and then also what it looks like in Philadelphia, helping them know their rights, knowing how to get connected to services. So they're currently doing workshops in all of our different school partnerships. They just did one yesterday and they did 3 back to back. So they're like really killing it. And I'm so proud of them to see from the start of developing that curriculum, and they're like running the show now. And so something else that was in our design from 1.0 from the very start, we have a peer advocate who does case management, and that peer advocate has that lived experience of housing insecurity, which we know how important it is. Nothing about us without us. And so getting into more of our program design, the case management, like I mentioned, the peer advocates, they're doing case management. We also have case managers who take more of like a guidance leading role in that partnership with their assigned peer advocate, and they have just different caseloads. So the peer advocate, they also oversee the youth ambassadors group. And so the case manager with the development of 2.0 services, we have our youth advisory board, which Quilla and Lexi are part of, and the case managers, they oversee that group. So we have 2 different youth leadership boards going, and really excited and proud to see how they're flourishing in their different roles. Also in case management, it's collaboratory goal planning, which I'll get into, and the direct cash assistance, which I know we're all like rooting for more expanding of those programs throughout the nation. And as I mentioned before, we added a mental health therapist who also doubles as a role for like crisis intervention specialist, being able to triage immediate situations. If a young person needs to leave where they're staying with their guardian, can our mental health therapist come in to triage the situation to at least, can they stay here for tonight? What can we do to be able to extend this even more? So in case management, it is at one-to-one peer support. And so for our 2.0 services, it is more intensive. So for 1.0, it was low barrier, coming as needed. It could be like monthly meetings if the young person wanted to be able to actually work on specific goals and tasks, or it could be drop in, like I'm just looking for a specific resource or support and I'll be on my way. But it's an open revolving door. And then for 2.0 services, it is intensive. So it is required to do biweekly meetings. So services are voluntary, but it is communicated directly to the young person when they do the intake and they are deemed eligible for 2.0 services, that they're entering into an at least 3-month biweekly meeting model. And so again, we still get into collaboratory goal planning, creative housing plan. We like to address it in like a holistic way. So yes, we're working on budgets, but we're also, seeing who's in their network. Like my supervisor introduced this plan called Who's on Your Bus. So we're assessing who's on your physical bus, who's on your emotional bus, who's on your social bus, who's on your spiritual bus, and just seeing how the people in your life may serve for different roles and being able to like think about that in those specific, high needs times. And then for the direct cash, we also do workshops. We do financial literacy with our partner bank and looking to expand that with other local community organizations as well. And we do community navigation. So we know that even if like we don't have the resource internally, we're going to look to connect them to the appropriate resource and make the connection hit outside, not just a cold handoff. We're like reaching out to the organization alongside the young person, also doing the work on the back end to make sure we're ensuring that connection. And then for direct cash transfer, we call it flexible cash assistance. We offer a one-time payment or stipends. And so initially, truly, we started out around like 2,100, and then we got another investor who took us up to 2,650. And right now we had to bump it up a little bit more because we're a bit underspent from our first year. So, which allows us to be able to help our young people in more impactful ways. And then one of the ways that our youth advisory board was able to flex their role in which we wanted them to do was we were seeing a trend with the young people when they were receiving their payments. And I'll let Quilla and Lexi talk a little bit how they use their role as youth advisors.
Yes, so the team of youth advisors, we noticed a trend that the engagement was lowered once the payments was all given at all one time. So we decided that it was best to break payments into increments, unless specific or specified reasons like moving costs or like furniture, for example. Yeah.
So I'll touch a little bit more on the flexible cash assistance. So along with the intensive case management in those biweekly meetings, they're creating a budget for the FCAs and they're envisioning like a long-term housing plan. And like I mentioned, we're assessing the current state holistically, not just financially, but those other areas. Because our goal still, as working under McKinney-Vento, is to remove the barriers in the way of a young person being able to graduate or get back in school. Because we see a lot of times the young people that we encounter that because of their housing situation, they're like, I'm not ready to get back in school. I'm trying to find a job because I'm trying to survive out here. And so trying to figure out, okay, how can we remove the barriers so you can get back in school and, find a safe and stable place so you can lay your head, so you can have the mindset to get back in school, and addressing all those different areas, which I know we all on this call can relate to, is challenging, especially when our population, they're so young and they're doing it out here by themselves. So again, we have Fulton Bank for our partnership. The great thing about our partnership with Fulton Bank is that they're able to open up bank accounts for young people as young as 16 when they're unaccompanied. So that was a struggle. We also do work through Cash App if needed, and money, but money we restrict to a certain amount just for safety reasons. And when they do go open up their bank account with Fulton Bank, they also get financial literacy courses like financial counseling. Fulton Bank is like a smaller bank, so they're very hands-on with their clients. So this was the second step or third step, one of the steps in our PDP process that Lexi's going to go over.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm having some difficulties. Prevention demonstration projects is community needs assessment. Our overview is open-ended questions. No, sorry about that. We have spread. I'm sorry. I just completely threw myself off with this. Spread over multiple sessions between 1 to 3 meetings. We have self-report based on the participants' perspective. We identify both protective factors as supportive relationships and resilience, access of risk factors, housing instabilities, trauma, to basically better understand the participants' situation and what they're going through at the moment. I'm gonna have to pass it back to you, Quadira.
Quilla, jump in if you want to talk about how it was developing this community needs assessment during that 6-month planning period. But during that 6-month planning period, we had a lot of young leaders in the room, and they were really vocalizing their experience, how it felt very clinical. It was cold. They didn't like how long it was. And so this helped us develop our needs assessment to make sure it's very conversational, and that on our needs assessment, we have a help guide in a left column, which is like open-ended questions that when you become versed in it as a, assigned worker, you're able to just start the conversation and let it flow and be able to answer what you need based like that's on the needs assessment to collect all the information. And so it's really leaning into protective factors and risk factors, and that helps our team be able to case plan around what are appropriate supports and resources I can put into place to help this young person progress. And Aquila, I'll pass it to you for this part.
Okay, yep. And so the outcome survey, the evaluation and outcome survey overview, we said that everyone, it's like a shortened version of the needs assessment, and it simplifies tracking and it's reassessing regularly. So the outcome survey is basically a snapshot of the client's progress 3 months after receiving services, which will then help the effectiveness of our support and really track that progress.
And so here are our target numbers. So in our design, we want to hit for like our first cohort, I guess we can call it. We wanted to hit about 40 youth for case management, about 40 youth for flexible CAS assistance, and about 30 youth to receive mental health therapy supports. And with like the 6 months planning period, we got off to like a later start with that, but we're about halfway with our flexible CAS assistant and about like halfway, of course, for case management. For our mental health therapist, I believe that we're maybe like a quarter of the way for that, but that is like much more intensive. And the goal is to refer out for longer term care for a mental health therapist, because we don't have the internal infrastructure to be able to provide longer term care on such a scale. And so thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening to us. We appreciate you at Valley Youth House. Please let us know if you have any questions. And this is our information to follow up with us for anything else.
Beautiful. Thank you all. Since I'm the only one off mute, I'll clap out loud. Really appreciated all of your information and all of the different ways that your programs are coming at Flexible Cash Assistance. And I think that it's a really beautiful reflection of all the different ways that communities could bring a project like this online in their communities. Um, so I wanted to, we have about, 17-ish minutes to before the end of the webinar. And so I wanted to give an opportunity. We kind of have two ways that folks can um, interact. We have some folks who I saved a couple questions in the chat for live Q&A with the presenters. And if folks would like to ask their questions off mute, if you raise your hand, then I can click allow you to talk, and it'll be Magic Live. So I wanted to pose the question to our panelists around there were a couple questions like that felt to me like, how did you get this started? Where are you going next? Like, how did you, I know the three of you are prevention demonstration program pilot sites. So that money came from the federal government, from the Family Youth Services Bureau. But were there other ways that you like dipped your toe into this before you got PDP? How did you kind of socialize these conversations in your community, and how did you get folks on board? Like, how would you guide someone here to start something in their community?
We'll start. Apply. Continue looking for like. I can tell you the minute more money is available, we're going to apply for it. It's been beneficial, and then I'm a really data focused, so like I'm loving that I'm going to get these slides afterwards because I love reading everyone else's data, but make sure that you're putting in the data and you're sharing the stories or your mission moments. I think for getting our community partners and stuff on board, I've had so many meetings with OCS because they aren't necessarily the most loved organization and they are overworked. So having somebody go into their office and say, hey, we want to help your youth and we want to help you. This is what we can do. This is the money we can provide, I think has been beneficial. Like, and getting them on board has been helpful. So it's just now you have two people working with the same youth from two different organizations to help as much as they can. But I mean, reach out. I know that Atlanta Covenant House is in the second round and they've reached out to me. I will share stuff all day long. So I've been emailing interview questions. I've been emailing job descriptions. I've been emailing like everything that we have to anyone in the cohorts. So, I mean, reach out. Like you have access to us if you have questions as they come along, because they always come along when we're not in these Zooms.
So true. So true. Yeah. And I feel like for Point Source at like the national level, it is a lot of what Sean said, that it is a lot of conversations and talking about it and sharing data. There is a really large growing data set around what resourcing young people directly could look like in our country. And so there's data around spending, there's data around outcomes. So, but it is all just continuing to talk about it and continuing to share your excitement. And who is the next person that I should talk to is how I frequently approach those conversations. Qadira, Jane, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add from how your programs got started.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So our program started from the partnership with the school district of Philadelphia with that RFP that was put out. And we are one of the contractor providers, along with two other community organizations, and as well as a liaison that is at our shelter, one of our shelter access points, that are doing intakes on site, and that helps with the data sharing across different systems for in Philadelphia in our community. So we started out with the partnership with the school district, and that is how, with our project manager at the ECHIA office, which is Education for Children and Youth Experiencing Homelessness at the School District of Philadelphia, Every school district has like an ECHIA office, but with their support, we are able to explain our 1.0 services and see if the selected schools wanted to partner with us. And so that's really how we got our momentum and like our hype put out about us. And then we expanded with the opportunity of PDP. But I would say, I believe Shasta Bruce, they were saying that it's important to have like community-based organizations to partner with. So that would be my suggestion. Starting on like the ground floor, like really developing like personal relationships with community-based organizations. I just got a call today from one of our organizations that we work closely with, and she was telling me that she has a connection with an organization that has single rooms, about 10. And she called me immediately. And I said, "Oh, bet we needs that. Please help us." And so it's like so much power in like working closely together and not just knowing the names of the organizations, but really like leaning into those relationships and helping each other.
Yeah, I think, Cordero, what you said is so powerful because it's really all about the relationships. For Sasha Bruce, we've had a long-standing relationship with Prince George's County and worked with them on a lot of projects within Prince George's County, being the youth shelter and some other things. But I think, especially with, climate changes with politics and funding being unsure, partnerships are even more important because the more partnerships you have, the more opportunity for outside funding you have. So I think makes it even more important.
Thanks, y'all. Um, you all gave a lot of good advice in the last few minutes, but Kenya also just put in the chat about launching their new GCT program, and curious if you all have any words of advice for someone embarking on a new program. Sean, I feel like you should give that slogan some live airtime.
Allison says this all the time, and I quote it all the time, but do what you do best and partner for the rest. Allison tells us to stay in our lane, and if no one is driving in the lane that we need, then we will maybe enter the lane, but partner with everybody, become best friends with everybody. Alaska's the biggest state in the US, but that means that everybody's fighting for the same money. We have learned a long time ago that it's better for us to not necessarily apply for everything and like share money. Like our YHDP was us and two other organizations when we launched it. So always kind of keeping people in mind. I love that people are sharing like, hey, we have beds. Because that makes all the difference because everybody you're working around is trying to help people as well. So if you can share any resources, it's huge. For the biggest hurdle, I got hired. It took 4 months for me to move over, and then I had a baby, my first one. So, uh, you know, just plan for the unexpected and know that it's going to be okay. I think the biggest thing is just um, like reminding yourself that everyone moves at a different speed than you do. I have to slow myself down a lot with OCS because I gave them the power to refer people, but in me doing so, that took one thing off my plate, and they are not as fast to refer people to me as I would like. So, just reminding myself that they've got 1,000 things going on too is my piece of advice.
For DCDPs, I really would say like centering young people was big with this project. I think, yeah, I think from the beginning to the end, because young people are the ones who are in the community, they're struggling day in and day out, and one of the most marginalized communities. And so they know exactly what their community needs. So really looking to them and letting them, giving them the resources, the power to lead when you have the opportunity and helping them is and supporting them along the way, right? I think that is my biggest role in this position is really providing the platform for them to be the leaders because who knows best is them more their community than I. So I look to them. Um, and yeah, I think it's really important because direct cash transfers is a very creative, innovative way. And sometimes as an adult, we box ourselves into things because that's how we've been brought up. That's how society has worked up into here. But DCTVs is really a new way of thinking. And I think young people bring all those creative and new ideas.
I would like to add my piece because I was sitting over here pondering and pondering, and it just came to me in a conversation that I've been having with my supervisor, Alyssa, for a while. It's like we know that when we develop these programs, we have to develop, okay, what are we looking to accomplish? And in, what we develop, we're like, okay, this young person remains stably housed. This young person gets back in school. And so for me, in my heart, I'm like, feeling away at times like we're not hitting these metrics. Like, oh, and it's so challenging. But as Rocio said, that we're working with the most vulnerable population. So it's not that simple. And my supervisor, she's also telling me the same thing. So I would say like a hurdle, something to think about is really think about what do you want to track? Because I feel like by those specific big metrics, we're missing the true impact of the program. And so thinking about how you can develop your scopes and your metrics, whatever language you want to use, to really show the impact and how beneficial our services are, because it's not just, it is, yes, we're trying to get a young person back in school at Synergy in Schools by removing the barriers. And yes, we're trying to like help them achieve safe and stable housing, but we're also leaning into like those other protective factors. And so, that is, I would say, like a hurdle obstacle that I am currently, trying to overcome and seeing, okay, are there ways that we can develop other things to track? So when we are developing like our strategy advocacy, plan, which we're currently doing, how can we really show the impact of our program? And so, and we're in that funding fight. That's what I would say.
Yeah. I want to add on to what you were saying. We talk a lot at PSY, like trying to remember the humanity in the work and not be so focused on the widgets of the work. And so, what does it also mean to raise up the like qualitative pieces and the qualitative data of our work? And like, how do we bring youth voices also into that implementation and into how our program is working well? And so I think talking about increased levels of hope, access to joy, like those things that young people get access to through this assistance, and having them be a part of leading that like narrative and messaging around how the data is being shared, what's the story that's being told, leading in our Washington design project right now. They're leading some advocacy in the State House to get a budget line passed. So how can we bring young people and their stories into that narrative and messaging change as well? Okay. I don't see any more open questions, but I want to give anyone who's in the attendee a chance to raise their hand. Okay. The best thing I learned in social work school was how to count to 20 and sit in silence. Thank everyone so much, especially to our presenters from Covenant House Alaska, Sasha Bruce and Valley Youth House, and of course, Rocio from Point Source Youth. Really grateful for y'all sharing your wisdom and expertise today, and lighting the path a little bit for another community to think about what it could look like to bring cash assistance to their community. I will send out these slides and recording once it downloads off my computer to everyone who registered. So you'll have my contact information out of that email. So if anyone would like to get more involved with the National Prevention Learning Collaborative and be a part of NPLC in an ongoing way, if your community has a really cool prevention learning or thing that you're doing that you want to share, that is another great way to respond to my email. So thank you again, and hope everyone is staying, gosh, like warm in these really like cold, frigid temperatures that are around our country. Warm in all the ways. Thank you so much, y'all. Talk soon. Bye.